So I wanted to talk to you about an incredibly exciting topic, like just incredibly sexy, earth-shattering topic. Um, so we're going to talk about MOUs. Woohoo! Are you feeling the tinglies now? Um, so, if you haven't listened to me the last 12 times I've said this, there are lots of resources on the FOTO website. And they're really curated perfectly by the Marthas into categories, right? So if you're looking for advocacy, if you're looking for how to grow your membership, all those kinds of things. But there are two that are particularly applicable for almost everything. And so I did put those in your handout folder because we talk about them all the time. And the first one is Friends 101. This is really your checklist for all the foundational documents and items that you need as a Friends group. If you are an existing group, if you're a new group, this is just a great checklist to consult every couple of years and make sure everything is still up to date. We could really call this your pathway to success. And what we have tried to do there is link with the exact website address where you need to go for all of those items. So everything from where you need to go for your state filings, for your 501c3, tax exempt with the IRS, everything that should be in your bylaws, your best practices for financial things. Janice is our financial guru on the FOTL board. So if you have financial questions, we are happy to hook you up with Janice. She is that, I don't know, she's a unicorn. She's a CPA who likes books. And we're so lucky to have her so she can answer all those financial questions. It talks about all the state and federal filings that you need to have. So the Friends checklist, the Friends 101 is a great place to start. Then you also have the Ethical Dozen, and this talks about it's the roadmap for doing the right thing. It really dovetails beautifully with the roles and responsibilities chart that is provided by the State Library and Archives and the regional libraries. If you have never seen that chart, it is such a great document. It literally lists all of the responsibilities of the library director, of the staff, of the library board, of the funding body, of the foundation, and of the Friends. And I say all the time that it's very hard to stay in your lane if you don't know where your lane is. And so that document clearly outlines what everybody's job is and how the puzzle fits together. So that, along with the Ethical Dozen, is a great combination for helping your friends find their way. If you have never seen that document from the State Library and Archives and the regional libraries, please ask your director. Your director can get you a copy. Your regional librarian can get you a copy. It's a wonderful document to have, particularly as you start to talk about an MOU. So I can't say that I have been in the past a fan of memorandums of understanding, but years of mentoring and I guess my own experience has softened me a bit to them. Certainly one of the biggest issues that we see mentoring, one of the most common issues we see are fractured relationships between and among the Friends, the library board, the funding body, the director. We get called a lot about those relationships. And we hear a lot from directors and staff that the Friends maybe overreach or they don't stay in their lane. And then we hear a lot from Friends that they don't feel seen, they don't feel appreciated, They're not given a seat at the table. They don't have a voice. And so a lot of those issues can be, if not resolved, at least alleviated by the conversation of an MOU and having a practical, clearly defined, cooperative MOU. So the history, I guess, of my disdain for MOUs is my English teacher background, being brought up by the likes of Martha Gill, and the vague language that they tend to have. I don't think there's anything really to object to in the ALA example. So you have in your packet a sample. So you have a proposed MOU that has a staple in it. And if you flip it to the back, there's the MOU that ALA provides, a sample MOU. And there's nothing really to object to in that. It all sounds good in this very vague kind of government speak means nothing sort of way. When I read it, I kind of hear Charlie Brown's teacher go long, long, long. And so if you look at a couple of those, it's like the Friends agree to publicly support the library and its policies. Okay, I can't object to that. There's nothing to object to. Yes, absolutely, the Friends should be doing that. The library agrees to provide the Friends a wish list each year that indicates the anticipated needs of the Friends support. Yes, absolutely. That should be happening. I love the ALA. I'm a member of the ALA. But those are not specific, measurable items. And again, I'm a person who needs a goal that I can achieve. I've got to have a goal that success is defined and measurable. I'm a teacher. I need to know what success looks like. So I think of it this way, teachers have this goal of like all students should read, right? Okay, what does that mean? We need to break that down. I've got to be able to give them a grade on something. So you break that down into things like each child's going to know 100 sight words by the end of the 9 weeks. That's measurable. You can figure that out. You can address that. And that's what I think I'm proposing is a new type of MOU that's more of a hybrid of the old school feels good, vague language that you see in that ALA example, and something that looks more like a grant agreement, which in many ways is what Friends are doing with the money and the support that they provide their libraries. So if you look at it that way and you reimagine your support of the library as a grant, it solves a lot of problems. Another thing that we frequently hear is that Friends maybe don't provide the same level of support every year, or that directors worry that they can't expect that level of support every year. And we need to be consistent as much as we can. Obviously, there are times that we can't. The pandemic was a great example of that. Many of us could not fundraise. But, I get calls a lot from directors who say, we raise this money, but then the Friends say, no, we're not going to fund summer reading. And they don't tell me that until 3 weeks before summer reading. So we also need to be sure that we're doing what we can for our libraries. So if you do it as a grant, it looks more like a grant agreement. It's broken down into categories. So if you flip that example over, then it has as a first category, after you get through the government speak at the top, scope of funding, or it could be scope of support. What are the Friends going to provide? Now, a lot of Friends, well, not a lot of Friends, some Friends have a war chest, right? The Brentwood Friends have a war chest. The Blount County Friends have a war chest. The Knox County Friends have a war chest. And oftentimes, what they provide is a check. And that's wonderful. But a lot of friends groups provide people power. And that is just as important. So this doesn't have to be about money. This can also be about volunteers. So just because you are providing volunteers over money doesn't mean that you can't use this type of MOU. It just changes the wording a little bit. So what are the friends going to provide? Are they going to provide money? Are they going to provide volunteers? If it's money, what are the funds going to pay for? If it's volunteers, what are they going to do? Do they need to come do story time? Are they going to work on collection maintenance? Are they going to, there's one friends group that they vacuum the library every week because there's no janitorial staff to do that. They come and they help with inventory every year. They come and help scan the books for inventory every year. They provide, like they said, the story time readers on Tuesdays and Thursdays. Whatever that is that you can do as a friends group, that's where you would put it in here. If you're doing money, what are those funds going to pay for? And you could do this just like I do our family budget. When I sit down with our family budget at the beginning of the year, we list all the things we want to do. We need a new roof. We want to encapsulate our crawl space. We'd like to go on a vacation. We put it in order of importance. We go down the list. You could do something like this and that. You could say, we're going to fund these projects until the money runs out. This is the order of importance. Then if you also notice in that example, they have added a caveat that says they will fund projects outside of the amount that they're funding for programming. So in this example, they're giving $50,000 for programming, but they've also said that they will entertain projects outside of that. Okay, so the second part is much more straightforward. It's the agreement period. You got to know when this agreement starts, when it ends. You've got to know how it renews. So think about those types of questions. I'm going to tell you to be very positive and be very cooperative in all this language, except probably for this section right here. It's kind of like a prenup where you're planning kind of for the divorce. You do need to have a clause in here for how each party gets out of it. What happens if you do need to terminate it on each side? And then we do have this happen. We do see this in our mentoring a lot. What happens if the friends cease to actively fundraise? You have to give the library a way to get out so that you dissolve and you allow another group to spin in. Okay? Branding and marketing, if you've ever heard me speak, I beat these drums a whole lot. It's one of my mantras. No one knows who the friends are or what they do. And the library has a voice that the friends don't have. And so we need the library to help us in our marketing and branding. It's a circle for me. If the friends support the library has to support friends. And fundraising is a beast. Again, I beat this drum all the time. If you've heard me, if you've ever been to an FOTL conference, if you've ever heard me speak, I've said this. Fundraising is a beast that has to be fed all the time. It can't be fed 1 or 2 times a year. It can't just be fed when the library says, hey, thank you to friends on National Friends of Library Week or on our anniversary. It has to be fed all the time. So this is where you outline how the library is going to acknowledge the support or the funding that you're giving. And there are so many ways to do that. It can be done on calendar listings. It can be done in newsletters. It can be done when people show up for programming. where that staff member just says, hey, this program's funded by the Friends. We want to say thank you to the Friends for doing that. It can be done on signage for equipment and technology that the Friends buy. We actually have a video from last year's conference on the website that has a ton of ideas about this. Obviously, we're happy if you want to reach out. We've got a lot of ideas about
and Kathy, you actually purchased a 6-foot tall banner.
I do. I'll send you a picture of it. I have a 6-foot tall banner that I move around the library.
And she wheels it to the door for summer reading or for stand.
Yeah, I move it around every time there's a thing. This program funded by the Friends. I'm big about banners and branded tablecloths and all those kinds of things. The Library of Things. Friends often fund the Library of Things. Those are perfect opportunities for little tags that say this funded by the Friends. Hot spots, sewing machines, weird shaped cake pans. Some libraries have telescopes, hotspot. Did I say hotspots already? Chess sets, book club sets. All those things are great opportunities because and research clearly shows that people have to hear or see something dozens and dozens of times before it sinks into their brain. So we need to be putting that out there as many times as possible. None of these things cost money, but this is a great time to get the library on board to do those. This is also a great time to ask them to be part of strategic planning. Now, I did not mention in here part of the library board because this MOU that wasn't necessary for this MOU. This group, they are already on library board. The library board bylaws have Friends representatives as a non-voting member of the library board, so that supersedes this MOU. But if you are not as a Friends member or as a Friends president, sitting on the library board as a non-voting member, that would be a great thing to add here. That's a great thing to advocate for. Because again, how can you be part of the solution if you don't know what's going on? Then, reporting requirements. So, data is king. For you to fundraise effectively, particularly post-pandemic, you need to be able to show what you've been doing and how you have been impacting your community. And so, again, the library has that information, and it's essential for you to get more members and to raise more money to have that data. So if you funded, let's say, like in this MOU, funded all the programming, it's really important that you get some data mining back from that. How were those funds spent? How many programs did you have? How many patrons did you serve? Because then you can turn around and put that into all of your fundraising information, particularly if you're going after corporate or business sponsorships and donations. That's what they want to hear. They want to hear that you spent $11,000 on children's programming, you had 14,000 kids show up, and you had 629 programs. Now, the flip side of that is you do not want to make this onerous on staff. You do not need to know how many 0 to 2-year-old children showed up. You do not need to know how many of them were boys and how many of them were girls and if they had pink bows in their hair. That's not the level you need. You need to know simple, big numbers. Corporate and businesses want to see big numbers. They just want to know how much money you spent, how many patrons you served, how many programs you had. If possible, and you can get a picture and an impact statement, that's amazing. If you can go and say, this child went to story time 18 times this year, and they now can read, and they're 3. That's their favorite time of the year, or the favorite time of the week, or whatever. Or this senior citizen comes to this event and it's changed their life in some way, those impact statements are fantastic for fundraising. So that's a great thing to put in your reporting requirements. You know, we need these to help us fundraise. And then also, you know how ALA said you'll provide a wish list, the library will give the friends a wish list? Well, here's where you make that actually measurable. When will the friends get that wish list? So you need a time, right? Because you guys have got to budget. You've got to have some fundraising goals. You've got to know what your plans are. What month will the library provide you with the wish list? When will you all sit down together to figure out that budget for the upcoming year? And then the last two sections are about the roles and responsibilities. So the first one is about the friends. Number one seems very simple. Please, as friends, maintain your tax-exempt filings and your state filings and keep them up to date. When I do go to the Capitol and lobby and talk to our Secretary of State, he says, do you know how many friends are not current on their charitable organization filing? I said, I do. And he says, can you work on that? And I say, I'm trying. It's so simple now. It's so simple. It's all online. On your Friends 101 handout, exact email, the exact website address is on there for you to do it. It's $35. If you don't know if you're up to date or not, you can actually search on the Secretary of State's website and find out. Even your 990 with the IRS, it used to be called a postcard. They don't even make your postcard anymore. It's a postcard online. It's an e-postcard, which I didn't know. I don't even think that's a thing. I don't think you can have an e-postcard. A postcard is not an e-thing. Anyway, it's really super easy to keep that up to date. And you want to be a legitimate 501c3. So that's an important thing to be. Obviously, you want to support the library. And then those ethical things that we were talking about in that ethical dozen. You want to agree that you're going to spend the funds you fundraise for the benefit of the library or for the operations of Friends. There are costs associated with fundraising, right? There are costs associated with book sales. You've got to have book sale crates, and you've got to have signage, and you've got to have bubble mailers if you're selling online, and you've got to have packing tape, and there are all sorts of things. But you should not be having parties for each other, and you would be surprised at what I hear. One friend's group spent 2/3 of their entire bank account and bought fuzzy socks for each other and had a Christmas party. And then they called me and they're like, that's fine, right? And I went, no, it's actually not fine that you had a party for each other and bought fuzzy socks. So things that you would think are common sense, but apparently not so much. Things like make sure you're inviting your director or his or her designee to all of your board meetings. They may not take you up on the offer, but you need to offer. They need to always be invited. I believe that Friends should be the A+ teacher pet star students. It should be acting in compliance with all library policies and procedures. If you don't know the library's policies and procedures, just ask your director for that policy meeting. And be consistent with the needs and objectives of the library. That's another time that it's important that you're at library board meetings, because how can you know what the needs and objectives of the library, what are they if you're not at that library board meeting to know? So that's a great argument for getting you that seat at the table. Hey, we want to be a team player. We want to be who you need us to be, but we can't do that if we don't know. And then the last section is about the roles and obligations of the library and the city or county, whatever your funding body is. This addresses that point of they've got to agree to spend the money, as outlined in this agreement. And this is where you maybe talk about those logistics. Are they going to give you some space to store books for a book sale or for online sales? Are they going to give you some priority booking of meeting space or book sale space? Will they give you some space in the lobby for some friends' promotional materials? Do you get some copy privileges for membership flyers, for book sale bookmarks, or flyers about the book sale? Will there be some staff assistance to design said membership flyers, promotional materials? Like for my Booktacular, I have a little flyer for that. Is a staff member going to help me design that on Canva and print that? Is there going to be, again, that seat at the table for strategic planning and other important library planning meetings? And then I'm going to conclude by just saying the big idea here is there's nothing wrong with that ALA MOU, except it's like a money laundering situation. All you do is put your friend's name and your library name on it, and you call it a day. There's nothing about it that's personal to you or your library. So for me, that doesn't make it very meaningful. So I encourage you to write something that works for you. And just keep all that language cooperative and positive. Include everyone, invite everyone. If they don't come, that's on them. But you extend the invitation to everybody. Keep it easy to read, because when it's easy to read, it's easy to implement and easy to follow. I'm giving you permission as the English teacher not to write complete, beautiful, flowery sentences. Bullet points work just fine, as long as they're parallel, right? Set really clear expectations, and don't be afraid to revise it, especially those first couple of years. Please don't see that as a failure. Because this MOU that I gave you, if you notice, went in effect January of 2025. And I will tell you, there were some days in spring and the summer, I'm looking at Janice, and maybe the late summer.
We actually met Friday on it.
Okay.
Yeah.
And it was dark. Like we were in uncharted territory. And it was not going great. And there were some growing pains. But I'm hopeful. I think it's going to be okay. I think there's going to be some revision. As there should be. Because when you do anything for the first time, right, it doesn't work. When I did Booktacular the first time, I made changes. I revised the plan. Anything you do the first time, you revise the plan. So don't be afraid to do it and then revise it. Take the pieces of all these ideas and make it work for you. Write something that works for you. And as always, if you need help, we're here. Reach out through the website. We're happy to help.